And I said, your job is this, go do your job. And I gave them a directive. It was clear communication. And I did that with the next person and the next person. And you know what? We put the fire out and we were rescued. But it was, how do you give that advice? The advice would be just in your being, when you have to make those command decisions and it's stressful, find something that works for you. For me, I look at my feet, I take a deep breath, and then I center myself and calm myself so I can then give directives that are calm and clear.
Welcome to the In Factor, conversations about how great entrepreneurs started, stumbled, and succeeded. I'm Rebecca White, and today's guest is Sandy Yawn, best known as Captain Sandy. Not only is she a renowned superyacht captain with over 30 years of international maritime experience, Captain Sandy is also the series lead on Bravo's hit show Dex Mediterranean. Throughout her life, Captain Sandy has displayed incredible resilience and excellence as she became a female role model and rose to the top of her industry. Today, she is still one of only a handful of female leaders in the maritime industry, but through her work, she is paving the way for women in the boating space. In this episode, we talk about what it's like to be CEO of a ship, and we dig into her exceptional leadership style that has helped her break through every obstacle in her path, from the glass ceilings and near fatal accidents on land to pirates and fires at sea. I'm so excited to have Captain Sandy on the show today. I know you will love this episode. So, Captain Sandy, thank you for joining me today on In Factor.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to have you. I'm a boater, as you know, and of course I've enjoyed all your episodes on Below Deck, so I'm really excited about that. And I was excited to meet you about a month ago or so here in Tampa when you were doing a special program at Marine Max, and twisted your arm to be on the show.
Yeah, honestly, anything to connect with the water or a boater, I'm in.
Okay, well, I'm definitely a boater. It's been life-changing for me. So, and I think it has been for you, and that's what we're here to talk about today. I'm really excited to talk about your story. A lot of our listeners are, I'm sure, fans of Below Decks, but they also, I hope, some of them are boaters, but most of them are entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs. And you've had a very entrepreneurial career that has kind of brought together your love of boating and even, building your brand and doing some exciting things with televisions. But you grew up in Florida, and I've been here now for 11 years, and it's hard to be here without being on the water, actually. You've had a lifetime on the water. And could you tell us a little bit about how you came from being a passenger on a boat to being the captain of a super yacht?
Sure, I'd love to. I grew up in Florida, water skiing, very young. We always had small boats, just water sports. It was all about recreational boating. I was that kid that, my sister was the perfect kid and I was that black sheep of the family. And she went off to college and I went to the school of hard knocks. I didn't graduate and I didn't go to college. So I answered an ad in the paper, washing boats, and I learned everything there was to learn about cleaning boats. And then I had a guy offer me a full-time job, and he actually invested in me, sent me to school. I learned engineering. I got my captain's license, and then I began this journey in becoming a captain. And that was, for me, a lot of hard work. I was really focused, and I thought, oh my gosh, I can make money, get a suntan, and be on the water at the same time. This is incredible. And be around really cool people, because the maritime industry, you're surrounded with the people who own the boats and you're like shoulder to shoulder with them. So I pursued this career. I didn't stop. I continued going to school. And it's usually when you start with an owner, they build up. And that's exactly what happened. I went from a 67 Hatteras to a 92, continued my education, and then on to a 157, and then became a charter captain in the Med. Well,
wow. Yeah.
Med, Caribbean, and Florida.
Yeah. So you did start out really as an entrepreneur with that first ad, right? That you put in the paper to clean boats. And And then you learned everything there was about it. So you stepped out and took a chance, and things kind of came together. So what's it like? What is the life? I know you do a lot now beyond just being on the boat, but what's it like to be a captain of a super yacht? What's a day in the life of that kind of
It's
position?
fascinating, fun, challenging. It's all those things. And remember, being a captain, you're like the CEO of a company because you are in charge of the finance, the HR. We wear all different hats, the marketing and, guest relations. So you are definitely a CEO labeled captain. And the thing for me is I get to meet all these incredible people. I get to travel so many wonderful places and learn about different cultures. And that to me is something that the maritime industry offers that I would never have gotten in school. And when you're face to face with these different nationalities, you learn about them. You learn, these interpersonal relationships, what it is, the human element. We have to take a class. It's called human element. It's called Helm. And it's all about how to communicate with different nationalities amongst each other and be in command at the same time. So for a captain on a motor yacht, it's awesome. But at the same time, it's very challenging because it isn't always about the budget. It's, obviously safety first, but, money's a big part of it. And you want to, operate in the confines of that budget and please your client, please the owner, and please your crew. And it's not always easy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a CEO, really juggling all those various aspects of operations and making sure that it all works. And you mentioned communication. I love that because my husband and I learned a lot about communicating with each other, actually boating. Because, when you're docking, for example, or when you're in a stressful situation, your voice can rise. And sometimes, what you're trying to communicate doesn't always come across. Yes. One of the things when we were docking, my husband would guide me because I couldn't always see on our sailboat. So he would say 5 degrees to port, and I'd go 5 degrees to port. But then he didn't think I had moved because the boat's slow. So he'd say it again. I'd go 5 more. And we learned I had to repeat things back to him a lot of times, just, so communication is critical. And you brought that up.
Yes. Yeah. And in the maritime industry, that's what we learn. We learn how to communicate. They teach you that because when you're giving commands over the radio or you're calling for help, you repeat yourself and you make sure you're clear and concise. And there's a whole different nomenclature for communication on a VHF. Also, one of the things I like to do with the crew is let them drive the boat so they feel the responsibility and they hear how important communication is. And when you're using a radio, you have to make sure you press the mic and then you speak. A lot of people will press the mic and talk at the same time, and you only catch a little bit of that. But just like you shared, in a stressful situation, remaining calm is very important. And I like to share this. A lot of people in any situation, when there's fear, most people react. And I always share this because I had a fire in the Red Sea. I had a moment where I had to have self-leadership. And I always share this. Leadership starts at home. And then you have to have that self-leadership. And one of the things I do, and I've used it over the years, is I look at my feet. I take a couple breaths and then I look up and then I stay calm and I communicate. So fear is a reaction and courage is a decision. And the courage comes from that pause, that knowing that, hey, if I communicate clearly, I will be able to transcend that communication in a calm way and keep my team calm in any scenario, whether it's in a corporate world, on a vessel at sea, on fire, or anything. And that's really something that I have learned over the years. How I respond and communicate is how my team will respond and communicate. So it's important for me to know that because I know my responsibility as a captain is to keep my team calm, keep my team focused, and make sure that they know their specific job and communicate clearly. And once you do that, you have a team that's incredible, and it certainly makes you shine to the boss, right?
Yeah. What great advice in there. We all face maybe not the kinds of stress that you do, but running a business can be very stressful, very frightening, take a lot of courage. And you're right. I've even learned that with my kids, my children, people around you that look up to you are going to take their cue. And on a boat and a super yacht, especially, you need your team to be aligned. Great advice. So, Captain Sandy, you are somewhat unique in your industry because it's male dominated. Boating has traditionally been, we've had way more male captains than females. I don't know the numbers on that. You probably have a better picture of that, but I'd love to talk, I love it every time I see a female captaining a boat. I just think that's really cool. And it should be much more the norm probably than it is. So could you talk a little bit about what that's been like?
Sure. Over the years, obviously, more women are on deck. The one great thing about Bravo TV is they've made that known across the country. You can actually be a yacht captain and you can work on deck.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly believe, maybe back in the day, it was the men who prevented this. But today, I don't think that's the case. I think it's women. Women need to, women can decide, I want to work on deck. And owners allow that opportunity. When you come to making decisions and command decisions, it's not about muscle or strength. It's about decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes working on deck, you handle these big lines and you have to have that strength where women don't have the strength as a guy, but you could still work on deck. I believe that women choose what they want to do. And if you really want to pursue a career that's in a male dominated industry, do it. Push those boundaries, push those barriers. Men are open to that. And I always share this, like I've been turned down for jobs because I was a female on a boat, but then, 4 more open. So yes, you always have that one that turns you down, but persevere, walk through that fear, choose courage and make that decision and just do it. I can't explain in my words how to make that happen inside of a person. It has to come within to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's really great advice. And, I think sometimes we get in the way of our own success. And that's probably true for men and women. But I think you're right. I love the fact that a lot of the things that you're doing with Below Decks is opening up maybe, providing young women, especially with a visual and a role model for what they can actually do. Because, there are a lot of assumptions when we don't know about things.
Right.
And are you seeing more women enter into this profession?
I'm just doing the show now. Like I just run the boat for the show. I actually was texting with a friend of mine who was my mentor. Her name is Vicky, and she was Paul Allen's captain. She was the first woman that I knew of. She won Charter Captain of the Year. She ran a big boat. She went from I think that she was on a 40, 45 meter, 50 meter, and then she went up to Medusa, which was 242 feet. It's a massive yacht. And I remember being in the Monaco harbor, watching her take it off the dock and feeling so inspired by this. So yes, there are women that are in the industry. I think Bravo's opened the door for people to go, hey, even in middle America where there's no water, I can actually work on a boat. So I think that network has reached these people more so than the maritime industry. Because as you know, the boating world's very small, very tight, and they've opened it up. You don't necessarily have to live on the ocean or, be near the water to want to work in this industry or be a captain or be a chief engineer. There's many women chief engineers. It's a possibility for anyone as long as they do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's probably true of a lot of things, right? Do the work, and that's what happens. So you'd been a captain for a number of years. I'm not sure how many, but about 5 or 6 years ago, you did take on this role with Bravo in Below Dex Mediterranean. So can you talk about how you got involved with the show? And I'm kind of curious about what all your colleagues, your family, friends, and maybe fellow captains out there thought about your decision.
Everyone thought it fell into my lap. Everyone thought it would destroy my career because it's out there. And, I considered not doing it. And then I thought, wait a minute, I believe in God, right? So I'm that person. It landed in my lap at a time where I was hit by a car, kidney cancer, went through a breakup, and then boom, Below Deck lands in my lap as I'm recovering from all those crashes and cancer. And they asked me, and I met with them, and I thought, hey, you know what? I'm going to pursue this and see where it goes. And look where it is today. Honestly, I feel like I was given this platform to inspire women and young kids, and that's what I'm doing. So as long as it keeps showing up, I'm going to keep doing it. And when that, ship comes ashore, I'll step out of that and into something else. And that's how I look. Doors open for people, right? If it's on your heart, it's probably what you're meant to do. Sometimes things land in your lap and you go, should I, shouldn't I? If it lands in your lap, it's probably a yes. So it's making that decision. And what was the second part of your question? Oh, my family. Well, they loved it, but my friends were resistant, but I did it and I'm grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what a great experience. And I agree with you. I think, a lot of times, there's this old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And it's kind of the same thing. There's this idea of serendipity, but I think a lot of times life prepares us for these opportunities. And the question is, are we going to have the courage really to step out and try something different? And you did. And how exciting and how fun, and what an opportunity for you, like you said, to inspire in a way that you might not have been able to otherwise, because to have a platform like that allows you to reach so many more people. And so tell us what's going on now. Where are we with Below Dex Mediterranean?
Well, our season's getting ready to air June 21st on Peacock and then June 28th on Bravo. And really, it's just about growing the brand and thinking outside the box. I want to educate young kids. I'm trying to get this Captain Sandy and the Ocean Rangers into schools. I think I found some funding for that, because when I was a kid, I never knew I could work in the maritime industry, and I wasn't like my sister. I wasn't going to go to college. That was never for me. If I would have known this, I think I would have been saved a lot earlier. So basically, I feel like that's my role, is to get this out there, educate kids in all aspects of the ocean conservation. You could be a marine biologist. You could be anything. The maritime industry is vast. Just look at Freedom Boat Club and all these other, avenues. You could be a yacht sales. You could be a yacht captain, yacht engineer. And to reach these kids when they're young, they can aspire to be in the maritime industry, which is a great industry. So basically, that's what I'm doing. The focus is kids. Yeah. And I love it. And I shared this. I was talking to about 800 city managers last week in Texas, and it was on leadership. And I read a lot of books that are tied to leadership, but in the storytelling way. Mm-hmm. I'm not a tech way, because I'm not that brain. And I came across this, in anything. Napoleon was a dealer in hope. And that's what Napoleon said, leaders are a dealer in hope, right? And I want to be the dealer of hope. I want to be that person, not just in leadership, but in life. Like, there are so many people, especially after COVID, they've lost their careers, they've lost their businesses, but maybe that's for a reason, so you get into something else. And there's always a positive outlook. And I'm the eternal optimist. I'm that person. I look at every tragedy as an opportunity to change or, keep moving forward. I also heard this: when you get pushed back, don't make a step back. Don't take a step back, make a comeback.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of stories too. And that's one reason I love this podcast. And students can listen to stories and learn so much from it. So I agree with you. And I think stories are really inspiring. So we talked about building the brand of Below Decks, but a big part of what you do now is building your own personal brand. And I know for many entrepreneurs, that's an important part of what they need to do. And so I was wondering if you had some thoughts on that, some things maybe you learned and some things you would share with our listeners.
Sure. I always start with this: if it feels right, then it is right. Because if you trust your gut, you should follow that, right? If it feels wrong, then it is wrong. And do the next right thing. And when I put my brand out there, I stay authentic to who I am. TV can go to a lot of people's heads. So my friends and family make sure I stay grounded, because sometimes it's smackdown and sometimes it's a gentle pull, but I'm grateful for that. And when you're building your brand, I would recommend you stay true to who you are, because that's your brand. And then hire or connect with those people who are good at taking it to the next level. So I know I'm an ideas person. I got that down. I work for a guy and he's an ideas person. And he said, we're those people. So you need the next level, right? So I have great ideas, but I'm not the person who can implement it into the next stage. So I engage those people who can help me take it from my idea to a reality. When I know my limitations and I stay authentic and I ask for help, it just automatically happens. That's the magic. There's really no magic, but the magic is staying authentic. Whatever your thing is, mine's ideas. I have great ideas. I love education for children, so I'm pursuing that. But I also learned with all my ideas, I can only focus on one thing at a time. And that's where you stay focused. And there's a speech by Denzel Washington, and he talks about how people dream. Dreams are great. That's what lands on your heart. Dreams are great, but you have to do something every day to work towards that dream and have goals and, connect with those people and continue doing that. And right now it's just about kids for me. I have the right people on my boat and they're helping me take it to the next level, because I'm not an expert in brand building, but I connect with those experts in brand building, right? I'm an expert on being a captain. I'm an expert of, leading crew. I'm not an expert at brand building. So I make sure I surround myself with those people and hire them and then put my ideas out. And I'm not attached to them. If they're not a great idea and they say, you know what, this isn't going to work, I let it go because I listen to the pros. And I always share this as well. When I have a team, because I have a team and they'll ask me a question, I always say, I defer to you because you're the expert. That's why you're in my life. So you advise me. I think it's got a kindness or, I don't know, respect. They ask me and I'm like, you know what? I don't know that answer. That's your job.
Yeah, that's great advice. So a lot of that starts with knowing yourself, right? And getting clear on who you are, because you talked about authenticity and talked about filling in sort of gaps in what you know and where your expertise is with other people. And that's great advice. And it's,
and also I'd like to share this. When you're on TV, you'll get I got a lot of offers. And I remember this guy asked me, and he's a big film director. And he said, Sandy, do you want to be like this person and just go after the low hanging fruit and just make money? Or do you want to be like this person and build a brand that changes lives? And I go, well, of course I want to make money, but I want to build a brand that changes lives. And that's for me. So whatever anyone's mission is in life, building your brand, you have to ask yourself that question. Do you just want to take and make money? Or do you want to build something that is sustainable and that changes lives?
Yeah, that's great advice. And it works in so many ways, right? In the decisions that you make. That it's kind of like figuring out your true north and always heading back there, right? Using your compass, right?
That's right.
Because the GPS doesn't always work.
That's right. And you have to know how to dead reckon.
Exactly.
Dead reckoning is you calculate your last known position and you calculate your speed and time and that should be where your next position is. But yes, a lot of times you don't have a compass, it doesn't work. And a lot of times you don't have a GPS. So that's when you go back to the basics. But you know what? I like that metaphor.
Yeah. There's so many great metaphors from boating, I think, for life. So you talked earlier about, I know you do a lot of speaking about leadership, and I've even seen that you've done some things on YouTube talking about leadership, and there have been some programs on TV, which I found very interesting. Would you talk a little bit about your leadership philosophy as a super yacht captain and as the CEO of your ship?
So it's lead her ship.
Right.
I learned by working for people. I did not take leadership courses. I learned by saying, oh, I will never, when you're a kid and you're growing up and you go, I'll never make my kids do that, or I'll never treat my kids like that when you're getting punished. Well, sort of like that when I was young and, starting in this business, I'll never treat my crew like that. Because in my mind, I was always going to be a captain. How I lead is how I would want to be treated. That's the magic. How I lead is how I would want someone to talk to me, how I would want someone to treat me. And also that self-correction. My leadership starts with leading myself first. Leaders have to learn to follow. You have to follow first before you can lead. And that's what I did. I learned to follow. I talk about this. There are soldiers. You have three types of people: soldiers, leaders, and bosses, right? I wanted to be a leader, but I had to be a soldier first. And soldiers take orders, they follow direction, they stay in their lane. And leaders lead. They're the first ones out there, right? So they take their team with them. Leaders educate, give their team the tools they need, support them when they need supported, and take the heat if something goes wrong. And they shield their team from that criticism or that heat. And they say, great job. So a leader is supposed to shoulder that and not spread that out into their team, because they know that their team did their very best. And sometimes the very best isn't good enough for the client. So what I always say to my team is, don't worry about what the client says. You think about how I think you did your job. It doesn't matter, because we can't please everyone. All you have to do is make sure that the captain is pleased. And as far as I can see, you guys did your job. And bosses, this is the other one. A boss sits behind a desk and gives order. Do as I say, not as I do. And that's the difference, if you want to work your way up to leadership. And I never want to be that person. It's selfless leadership. It's servant leadership. It's all those things. I'll give you an example. I had a Monaco Grand Prix charter, a repeat client. He's about 5 feet tall, and he comes on the boat. My first officer, he was just promoted. I just promoted him. He had his epaulets on, dressed, looking handsome at the passerelle because, single. And I was watching him. I was standing behind him and seeing how proud he was with his, 3 bars. My client walks on, gives him his shoes and says, hey, mate, will you clean my shoes? I saw my first officer's eyeballs. And I grabbed the client's shoes and I go, no problem, sir. And I motioned for my first officer to go downstairs, and I proceeded to clean his shoes. I did not reprimand him. I just showed him through my actions. And I said, sometimes what you think is a job that's above you or beneath you is not the case. I clean his shoes. And my thought was, as long as he sees me doing it, he's like, wow, the captain does it. And I cleaned the shoes and I gave them back to him. And that's how you lead. You show them that you're willing to do the job, that you can do the job, and that you show them without reprimanding them. I invest in people, and that's it. That's the goal. I mean, that is the gold.
The gold standard. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because I've watched, what I've seen of your leadership, and it is different from many of the captains that I've seen and then some I've experienced. My husband had been a sailor for a long time, but I took lessons after we got married. And the first captain that we dealt with when I was learning on the sailboat liked to yell a lot. And it made me really nervous. I was already nervous anyway. And I didn't respond well to that. And he was kind of condescending to my husband, who had already sailed, but who knew more than me for sure. But the second time I took some lessons was with a younger captain that was just, he was really encouraging. And he asked me first, before we started, tell me what are your thoughts? And, and I basically was able to share more about who I was, why I wanted to do what I was doing and that sort of thing. And, he figured out right away kind of how to put me in situations where I could excel versus situations where he could point out what I was doing wrong. And it made all the difference in my comfort level and my willingness to learn to sail. And, both of them, we were on, one was a 54-foot, one was 40. So they were, big enough boats that there was a challenge a time or two. And there was a lot to learn, as with sailing and boating in general, just even learning the language. But it was such a different experience. And I've watched you, and it's really a different experience. And so my question for you around that is, I love where you're going with that. But my question is, how do you deal with, does that still work in a crisis situation or in a stressful situation? And how so?
Yes, it does. And first of all, a leader should know your job well. When I step on a boat, I think like this. I give my crew 100% trust. I trust them. They have my trust and they have my respect. I don't think that I have their trust or respect. They have to respect the command position, but they don't have to respect me as a person. So I know that I have to earn their respect, their trust, and in turn I get their loyalty, right? So my job is to show them that I know exactly what I'm doing, that I will have their back, that I will support them. And that's how I move forward. And I share this. And I start like this. Don't ever be my last thought, my first thought in the morning and my last thought before I go to bed. That is not a good day for you, right? Because even in this leadership role, you still have to make hard decisions and let them know that that's not okay. If you really want, and I share this, if you really want to be here, I get, rid of the pleasantries first. We go over that and it's all the rules and my expectations. So right from the beginning, they know my expectation. They know the confines of, these are the rule breakers and these are the deal breakers, right? And I make sure that's clear. And the next step is then I show them through my learning that I know my job. When I had the fire in the Red Sea, I had all eyeballs on me. And in my mind, I was scared to death. But my body exuded like, I'm in command. Don't worry. We got this. I got a warship on the way. We got this. And at the same time, in my mind, are the pirates going to make it here first or the warship? What I did was I stood in hope. I gave them hope, and I gave them the calm that I wasn't calm inside. Remember, I said I look at my feet and I look up. I got that calmness from that technique. Even though inside I was scared to death, that energy wasn't coming off of me. And I made a couple of jokes and, the crew started to relax. And it's in those moments. And that's when I think it's defined if you're a leader or not, is that when you're in those life-threatening moments or those very stressful moments or, fireable moments, can you stay calm in the middle of the storm? So be the calm in the storm. And that's really the goal. And that's, I think, what makes a successful leader is being that and staying and be the communication direct. Like when I had people freaking out, one girl tried to jump overboard, another guy just froze, my first officer, and I looked at him, I made everyone, I go, let's all take a deep breath. We did it together. And then I looked them each in the eyes and I said, your job is this, go do your job. And I gave them a directive. It was clear communication. And I did that with the next person and the next person. And you know what? We put the fire out and we were rescued. But it was, how do you give that advice? The advice would be just in your being, when you have to make those command decisions and it's stressful, find something that works for you. For me, I look at my feet, I take a deep breath, and then I center myself and calm myself so I can then give directives that are calm and clear.
Yeah. So there's several things in there I want to talk about, but while we're talking about it, would you share a little bit more with our listeners about that? I know you received an award for the way that you handled the situation. Could you tell a little bit more about that story, the fire?
Sure. Yeah, I worked for a billionaire Arab 2 years, I think after, so 2004, President Bush was reelected, I think a couple years after September 11th. I don't remember that year. And then 4 years after a couple years after the USS Cole was bombed. So I take this crew, we journey through the Red Sea. Along that way, this kid's sister got killed in a car accident. She was only 21, so I had to deliver that news. By the time I got to Egypt, we flew him out back to New Zealand. I boarded a British SAS officer to keep the boat secure, safe and secure, and the crew, of course. And then we started our journey through the Red Sea. And when I got into the Red Sea, it was really rough. Brand new boat. When a boat's pounding in the ocean, all the sediment from the tanks start coming up. And then, things happen. And it's never in calm seas do boats break down. It's always
absolutely.
So that's what happened. So we had to find a place to anchor, and I anchored off of these islands off Yemen. And we didn't know it was a military camp was there. By the next morning, we were boarded, machine guns. The women were, hiding, and that lasted for a couple days, and then we repaired our engine, and that's when we had our fire. Excuse me. It's interesting what you remember. I had heard prior to that, NATO formed a coalition of warships to monitor pirate areas. And I had heard Coalition Warship 68. It was a woman voice. And what stuck out to me, no men were answering her. And it made me mad. I'm like, they answer the men, but they don't answer the woman, and that stuck out. So I called Warship 68, said, I'm an American citizen, sustained a fire in Yemen territory. And they said, you're our priority and you'll remain our priority until you're safe. And they rescued us. And, I thought, okay, yes, we can breathe a sigh of relief. But you know where they took us? Hodeidah. So now I get taken from sea into Hodeidah, and during Ramadan, and we're surrounded with gunboats, and it was terrible. 13 days of hell. We made it out. It was not fun for me. Then for 5 years, I defended my license in a lawsuit, because when you're in command of something like an airplane or a boat, for some reason, they like to blame the captain, no matter what, because they don't want to pay the claim. And I defended my license for 5 years. And finally, I got the letter that every decision I made was the right decision. And I'll never forget this. I was sitting at a table with 15 lawyers around the table. Everybody was lawyered up, and they were all eyes on me. And it was all men. I was the only woman there. And this one attorney just really ripped me apart. And I remember I was done. 5 years later, I go, I'm done. I looked at that attorney and I said, you're trying to blame me when your client's equipment failed. And what you should be doing right now is thanking me that no lives were lost and the vessel was saved. And I got up and I walked out. I go, I'm done. And that's when 2 weeks later, I got the letter saying that I was free and clear.
What an experience. And all of that, I mean, first of all, the stress you had to go through with the experience, and then 5 years of dealing with whether or not you could continue with your career. Wow. It's no wonder that you dealt with some health issues after that. That kind of thing will really wear you down. But I know you learned a lot from it, and you received an award for that, for your bravery and courage through that. So congratulations. And I hope you never have to deal with anything remotely like that again.
Yeah, I'll share this fun little fact. I'm in the Flynn's house now, and that's who taught me how to drive a boat. And his wife and I are like sisters. And she goes, Sandy, because I make everything look fun. If I have to work, I'm going to find the fun in it, right? And I always challenge myself. I'm going to give myself 3 hours to do this, or, time management. And she goes, you Tom Sawyered me, because, painting the fence,
right.
Tom Sawyer. Yes.
That's perfect.
He told me that today, because, I was like, hey, can you, it's like fun. And I think if a leader brings that energy for their team's in. And also team building. And I do a lot of that. And I make sure whatever boat I run, that there's money in there that I can do team building.
Yeah, but that's all great advice. One other question that some of your conversation brought up to me was, you mentioned that you have to earn the respect of your team, but that you give them respect. And so I imagine you spend a long time with making decisions about who to bring on the team. Is that correct? Do you have that? Are you able to?
In the maritime industry, yes, but for the show, they're all casted. I meet them for the first time when I go to the boat for the first time. I meet the boat and the crew for the first time.
So that's interesting, I'm sure.
Very stressful. But yes, over the years, all captains hire and fire the crew because you're in command, right? So what I do is hire department heads, and I empower them and encourage them to hire their team. So, and I always say, in the beginning, I have them all sitting down and I share with them, these are your department heads. You go to them with any issues. If it makes it to the bridge, usually someone gets fired, because if you can't work it out amongst yourself, how am I going to work it out? Unless you're sexually harassed or something else. And I think problem solving amongst your teams, I think that's something that should be really taught more, instead of taking it all the way up to the top. Because as a captain, I'm dealing with a lot. I don't want to be thinking about why the third stew's not doing laundry, or, I don't want to have to think about that. That's why I hire my department heads to hire their team. So they're responsible. And that's, giving them that responsibility and empowering them to make command decisions within their departments. And when it comes to that point where I have to step in, usually it can't be resolved. And that's when I say, obviously, I hire my team. They're excellent at their job. And I'll give you this one example. I had a second stew come to me. I was in mid-charter, sits on the bridge and says, I can't work with the chief stew. And her first officer, her boyfriend was my first officer. So now if I lose one, I lose two. And she goes, either you get rid of her or I quit. So I said, you sit right here. And I went down to her department head and I said, I go, Aoife, I don't care what you have to do to get us through this charter. You send her to bed, you take her for ice cream, but you make this much money and she makes this much money. You fix this until we get to the dock and find your backup. And she did. And so I came back to the bridge and I go, oh, it's all worked out. Go talk to Aoife. And it's those moments where I think a person in leadership should, think about the big picture, because I had a charter to complete, and you're only as good as your team, right? So I'm only as good as my last charter. If my clients report to the broker, it was terrible, the chief stew, blah, 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 then I'm not going to have a job. And it just, continues to go up to the owner. So you deal with these, you make these decisions, and you empower your team. And that's exactly what I do, is I hire these people in the maritime industry to hire their people.
Right. That's always a challenging part of every entrepreneur, I think, to go from doing something themselves to empowering other people to do it. And so a lot of great lessons in there. One of the questions I like to ask my guests is about resilience. And it's pretty obvious from all the stories we've talked about that you've developed a lot of resilience over the years. In entrepreneurship, I talk a lot about executing past failure. And I just wondered, were there any times where you had like a colossal failure, or, you thought you might be ready to quit, but you kind of had to push through it, besides, fires and being kidnapped and all of that, but on a different scale? Did you ever deal with that? And what have you learned about resilience, or any advice about resilience?
Sure. As a captain, thank God I've never really run aground. Those are really fireable moments, because when an insurance company has to get involved, they won't insure the captain for the boat. And okay, good story. Owner hired me, went to the Caribbean, and we had two boats that one lived on the boat. So that was probably about $85,000. And then we towed $225,000 boat. Our hydraulics stopped working, so I couldn't load the other little boat. So I called the owner and I said, why don't we ship it? I can't load it, and you have a deadline for me to be in Florida. And he goes, tow it. I go, I'm already towing a boat. He goes, well, tow it behind that boat. And I said, I can't. It's just, and he goes, I go, it'll fill with water. He goes, well, stop and take the water out. So I could not explain to that owner that that's dangerous and that's impossible. So my decision was to tow it. I'm going to listen to what he said. I know it's not going to make it. And we lost that boat at sea. Now, I knew that I didn't tell him. So I arrived in the Bahamas from the Caribbean. And the next morning, the crew were knocking on my door because they had taken the other boat out for, a ride. Knocks on the door. He's all wet. And he goes, you got to come look at this. 6 a.m. in the morning. I go outside and the other tender's upside down because they had docked it and it went under the dock and it filled with water. Oh. Instead of waking me up when it was full of water, they untied it and it flipped upside down. So now I've lost two tenders, right? Those decisions. Now, the second one was not my fault. The first one was my fault. I should have never towed it. Now I have to make the call. And you know what I did? I already knew it was done. So I called him up and I said, I'm going to give you the bad news first, and then I'm going to give you the good news. And I shared with him that we're both lost at sea. I go, but I looked at the insurance policy. It's only going to cost you $500. You're going to get your tenders replaced, and then I'll resign. He goes, good idea. And I had to, because I knew he was going to fire me. So I said, I guess I should resign. And he said, good idea. I resigned. I said, I'll get your boat back. I made sure I did the right thing. And then there's one more story where I didn't have to resign and I didn't get fired. Is I worked for the founder of First Republic Bank, and I forgot to do something. It was pretty major. He gets an mean email from a broker. He sends me that email and he goes, call me to discuss. Well, that feeling to call me, and I read that email and I was like, oh my God, I forgot. When he picked up the phone, and this is what I want to share to everyone. Own it. Don't make excuses. Own your mistake. Own it. And so the first words out, he goes, explain. He didn't say hi, explain. And I said, honestly, Jim, I forgot. I go, we just come off this busy time. I completely forgot. He goes, I knew it. He goes, and he was so cool. He goes, I knew it had to be something. He goes, I knew you didn't do this on purpose. I just knew it. And he was like, don't let it happen again. And he hung up. That was it. And so for me, what that really resonated in me was tell the truth, own it. I forgot, and take responsibility. And I didn't get fired.
What great advice. It seems like we live in a world today where everybody wants to point the finger and blame everybody else. And to see somebody that's had your success and all the awards and, just highly competent, show your vulnerability and say, I mess up too, but I own up to it. And what a great lesson and what a great message to send to all of our listeners and for all of us to think about. You mentioned earlier that you kind of have a platform now working with young people. I'm just really interested in kind of where are you headed next? I mean, what's up for Captain Sandy? I know you've got a new season that's about to air and you're enjoying that. What kinds of other things are you working on now?
Well, speaking, leadership, and I'm going to be doing a live tour. So I started with this I Believe tour because I was that person that I needed, it wasn't like my sister. I was the other person. And I wanted to be able to inspire people by using music. Obviously, the education side for kids, the Ocean Rangers, educating the ocean. But the live tour for me is going to be to infuse music. And I'll share this. I had a friend that was always depressed. I got in her car and she was listening to Coffee House. And I go, why don't you change the station? Like, why don't you just change the station? So what we input, it does affect us. So what we listen to, right? If there's a tone, and years ago, I met this astrophysicist at a function, maritime function, and she recorded the music of the stars. And she taught me that our heartbeat, it's all about frequencies. Like we have VHF radios, it's a frequency, 22, we have frequencies. And she goes, the heartbeat's on a frequency. And when you hear music that you connect with, it's beating on your heart's frequency. And I was like, wow, that really touched me. And I just thought, what I listen to, it impacts me. So I like playing positive music and happy music. And then there are those times you want to hear, slow jazz or whatever. But I told her, put on boogie shoes. The next thing you know, we put on this song and she's like happy. And it's those endorphins that release. So this, it's not called I Believe. It's this new live show I'm going to do. It was going to be infused with music. And the takeaway is a Sandy set, right? This is what I listen to. And even when I'm challenged and I'm in, those moments of decision making, I'll play a little piece of music and I'll get that courage. Because how many times have you watched a movie, Chariots of Fire? You just want to go out and run, right? You just want to run. That inspiration, that type of inspiration. And I watched this Invictus. If you Google this, it's Morgan Freeman leadership lessons, and Colin Powell did a great speech. But you hear these people, how they inspire teams. And I always think like that. It's a team, right? We're a team. I'm a coach. I'm a leader. I'm all these things. I'm a person. I'm a human. And, even on our Bravo pickups, people out there, they're can be brutal. And I go, I have skin, I'm human, I make mistakes. And you do that self-correction. So yeah, it's music, infuse the soul with music and change that thinking. And that's what I'm doing.
That's so cool. So will you be going around the US or around the world?
Right now I have like 70 cities booked.
Are you going to be in Tampa?
Oh yeah, I'll be in Tampa. I'll make sure you go. Yeah.
Yeah, make sure I know about that because I'd love to experience that. Yeah. Well, Captain Sandy, I could stay and talk a long time because first of all, we have a love of boating and the water, but I just love your stories and I'm so inspired by everything that I hear. But I know you've got a lot going on and I need to let you go. But before I do, I always end by asking my guests if they had one piece of advice that they would leave for our listeners, knowing that a lot of them are students and entrepreneurs and people that want to be entrepreneurs. What would that be?
It would be what I learned. Leaders are dealers of hope. Just be that beacon of hope, because no matter what you do in life, you have to have hope. And that's really my message.
And what a great message, especially after about 18 months of what we've dealt with over the pandemic and isolating. It's great to be back out and I'm excited for your tour and excited to see the new episodes and to follow all the things that you're doing. And I'm especially excited that I've gotten to meet you and just take a little bit of that positive energy from you. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, likewise.
Where can our listeners find out more about you and what you do?
So my website, CaptainSandyYawn.com. And, I'm on Twitter, the same, and Instagram. It's all the same. Captain Sandy.
Sounds great. Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and would like to learn more about entrepreneurship, we would love it if you hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of InFactor.